Hey folks, how you doing today? Welcome to my very first episode of the R Files. My name is Rob, and yes, I know I got very creative with the name. I was going to use X Files, but my powers of intuition told me that it may have already been taken. So I went with the R Files, not because my first name is Rob, but I just enjoy resurrecting, reviewing, and bringing up old cases. So the R can stand for anything. And ever since I've been a little kid, I've been fascinated with the paranormal. When I was in 4th or 5th grade, I ended up taking out a book about the Loch Ness Monster, I think almost 80 times in 1 year. And finally the librarian said to me, Rob, you cannot take out your band from taking out this book. You had to take out something else. So guess what? I went and took out a book about Sasquatches for about another 25 times. She said, okay, Rob, you got to take out something different. So from there, I went to UFOs, and you can guess the outcome. So anyway, with that said, I just enjoy anything and everything about strange things out there, whether it be ghosts, like I mentioned, cryptids, zoology. I love all the shows out there, Hunting Sasquatch and Monster Quest isn't on anymore. But anyway, I wanted to make my own YouTube channel just about different cases that I found in the past, or different YouTube videos that I find extremely, extremely interesting. And originally I was going to start the first episode about sea monsters, and I have some great video footage that I found on some old YouTube videos. However, I'm trying to relocate it. I put it somewhere. I can't find it. So right now, I'm hot on Missing 411. In case you haven't heard of David Paulides, he is an investigator out of California. I believe he lives in Colorado now, but he originally, I think, is from California. He was a 20-year law enforcement officer, and after he retired from law enforcement, went and worked in the private sector in Silicon Valley, and he did all kinds of security consulting and all kinds of fun stuff. And then from there, he started to get really involved with Bigfoot and Sasquatch hunting. He started his own organization, and while he was doing research at a national park, he came upon clusters of missing people, and that's what he calls them, clusters. In other words, groups of people that go missing from national parks, actually all over the country, and in what he calls clusters. And what's interesting is that all these people have something in common, and he's ruled out animals attacking them, mountain lions or leopards or whatever the heck you want to call them. It's not anything like that. He's kind of ruled out cults or serial killers. Again, these people do not fit the profile of somebody doing that or an animal doing that. It's just very strange stuff. They find people with their shoes missing. And I'm talking like either one shoe missing or both shoes missing. If you're out in the wilderness, chances are you're not going to take your shoes off and go running through the woods, stepping on rocks and sharp sticks and everything else. It just doesn't make any sense. And these people are found, some of them are found 10, 20 miles away from where they originally were reported as missing. Sometimes these people are in groups, either first in line or last in line. Sometimes they're by themselves. Sometimes they're hunters who are armed. They have radio beacons. They have cell phones. They have all the survival equipment to get a signal out, yet they don't. And they find their equipment miles from where these people go missing. Sometimes it's kids, sometimes it's aged adults, sometimes it's people with disabilities. It's sometimes people with extreme intelligence, doctors. They found a marathon neurosurgeon. The guy was a neurosurgeon, also a marathon runner. He had gone ahead from another group of doctors that were all hiking on the weekend. He was supposed to meet up at base camp. They didn't find him. They found him 10 miles outside of camp where they were supposed to meet. They found him floating in a creek with his clothes on backwards, his shoes on backwards, and his equipment stacked neatly next to the creek. No explanation how he even got to that creek, because there was a giant cliff, and there's no way he would have gone off that direction. He was going in an opposite direction. So these are very strange things. And right now I'm going to let David talk about, there's a podcast I'm going to play for you right now where he talks about an introduction to these strange disappearances that just don't make any sense at all. So let's roll.
The other part of this is that a lot of times clothing or shoes are removed off the victim. A lot of times, I would say 90 to 95% of the time, the victims disappear in the late afternoon or early evening. Many of the victims either say to friends or associates that they don't feel well, or they have some type of disability that's later told to the searchers by the family. Now, I've said this on all your shows. I'll try to get through it real quickly. Originally, looking at national parks. Reason being is it's a specific area, and the national parks have a national park police. Police are really good. They're trained well. They're at 211 locations across the U.S. So you know that they're going to keep track of the stats. We filed the Freedom of Information Act request against the National Park Service for a list of missing people. Got a call from one of their attorneys asking me why I wanted the information. I said just for research. They said that they don't keep track of missing people. And I defied you to go into any medium-sized police department in the U.S. and ask their police chief for a list of missing people. And that person couldn't have a list on their desk within 30 minutes. Park Service says they don't keep a list. So I said, okay, I'd like to get a list. And they said for Yosemite, that'll be $34,000. For the entire system, $1.4 million.
Jeez.
Needless to say, that was shocking.
It's maybe the most amazing thing to me because, as you know, I after we had talked about some cases here in Nevada, I made some inquiries and got the same answer. So it's not something that you're making up. I mean, that's what they said. We don't have a list. This point about the victims having an illness or disability, a lot of times it's the very young. And as I saw in the new book, The Hunters, these guys are experienced woodsmen, but a lot of them are elderly people. So it's like the young, the old, the sick, the infirm. It's almost like a culling of the herd kind of a process from one perspective.
It almost seems that way. And the other part I've talked about before is sometimes these victims, and I note this in this latest book several times, the victims tell a friend or tell someone right before the disappearance that they don't feel well. And that's occurred in other disappearances in other books before. And you got to understand that these search and rescue people and the hunters that are friends with these people in the woods, these searches aren't periphery, quick, and done. These are massive searches. And it makes no sense that they don't find these people. And you come back, say, a month later, well, at that point, the body's getting pretty ripe, and you bring in cadaver dogs that can smell a dead body for miles. And the idea that they don't find any body, firearms, backpack, nothing, that doesn't make any sense.
I mean, we'll get into this later, but it's like they're taken somewhere else, and then some of them get brought back.
Oh, that's been brought up to me more than once, yes, for sure.
You've in the hunting cases, we'll get into maybe the we're going to take a break here in a second, but you've broken it down by the states with the most disappearances of hunters, which I think is kind of chilling. I was surprised by this. I had 2 states in mind that I thought would be at the top of the list, and they're not. So when we come back, we'll get into that list, and then we'll go down into some of the anomalies involved in the cases, specific cases that you have analyzed. Starting with one, a guy from my home state here, a guy up in Reno who went on a hunting trip up north. We're talking with David Paulides about his new book, Missing 411 Hunters, Unexplained Disappearances. In a moment, we dive into the new cases. Stick around. I had read that the characters in this song, The Wait by the band, are based on real people that were known to the members of the band, the guys who put that song together. It's a great classic. We're talking with David Paulides about his new book, Missing 411 Hunters. And some of the cases we're about to get into will chill you to the bone. I mean, the hunters experienced outdoorsmen and outdoors women. They're not all men, most of them are, but some of them are women. They know their way around. They hunt in the same areas year after year, many of them. They are least likely to get in trouble out in the woods. They are armed. They know how to protect themselves. They know how to survive in the wilderness, but something snatches them up, takes them somewhere else. A lot of them don't come back. We're going to get into those cases in just a moment, right after this on Coast to Coast AM. Dave Paulides, if I had to guess, before I read the book, which state had the most cases of the 148 or so that you deal with in the book, I would have guessed California, only because it's such a massive population. I don't know if they've got millions of hunters, but I know it's a very active hunting state, either that or Alaska, but that's not how it breaks down. Share that with us.
So in order of disappearances, Idaho had the most with 18, Montana 13, Washington 11, Maine and Oregon were tied at 9, and Colorado had 8. And what's interesting about that stat is that Idaho also has a lot of people that weren't hunters, hikers and such, that have disappeared and never were found. Now, the most disappearances by year, 1950 had 8, 1948 had 5, and then by month, November, they had 62, October 46. That's kind of understandable because that's predominantly when hunting season's going hard. Kind of strange is that February is the one month out of the 12 where there were no disappearances. And then other anomalies on the list, there were 8 women that were listed in the book that I wrote about. And unbelievably, 2 of the 8 disappeared within 3 days of each other in 1950. One was in Vermont and one was in Montana, and I thought that was really strange. And then 3 hunters disappeared in different instances within 7 days of each other in Michigan. And I wrote a lengthy part of this in the book, and this was in 1909. Between November 9th and November 16th, 3 vanished and were never found in far northern Michigan. It was really, really a strange set of instances there. And then 2 age groups with the most disappearances, 22 years old and 65 years old. 22 had 7 and 65 years old had 6. So again, we're talking about those opposite ends of the spectrum. And then there's more anomalies on the list, but those are the big ones.
I mean, as you note, most of them overwhelmingly are men. I guess it probably corresponds to the fact that more men are hunters.
Oh, I think so. I think that would be logical. In some of the instances that I wrote about, a wife went with them. They went into a hunting camp, and while they were there camping, something happened, and either a child that was with them disappeared or the wife disappeared. But it was in that hunting environment where everyone was armed, and all of a sudden someone's gone, and nobody could explain how, even though there's probably hunters all over that mountain, and the people weren't found.
Okay, folks, we're back. So we just listened to a little bit of an introduction about what David was talking about with George Norrie from Coast to Coast. And in case you didn't quite grasp it, we're going to see a case right now with Aaron Hedges, who's a bow hunter, and he was found with his shoes missing. His body wasn't found, but the shoes were missing, and his bow and everything else was found miles from him. Again, doesn't make any sense. He got separated from his hunting crew, very experienced hunter, and again, these things are happening all over the country. So let's play this podcast clip, and I'll be right back with you.
Now, there's 2 feet of snow on the ground. You're the search and rescue people. You know Aaron's not going far, if he went anywhere. So they brought 20 different canine teams into that area to see if they could pick up a scent. They found nothing. They brought in 7 equestrian teams. They found nothing. They looked for tracks leaving the area. They found nothing. 50 ground searchers found nothing. Now, they brought in a helicopter with forward-looking infrared, and they found nothing, meaning that they were looking for something emitting heat on the ground. And if you die one day, you're going to emit heat for a couple days. The National Guard flew a series of sorties. They found nothing. 15 days after the search started, they found nothing, and it was terminated. Now, 9 months later, the case takes an unusual turn, to say the least. Two men were working on repairing a fence in Sweetgrass County. One man was repairing the fence, and his dad was just kind of walking around keeping him company, visiting. Well, his dad finds a bow, a backpack, and an orange vest. And his dad said he's looking at this stuff, and he's thinking he's going to find a body because it must have been a bear that killed someone right here. And they looked around. They didn't find anything other than just this equipment. Well, the men called the sheriff, and it wasn't before long that the sheriff ID'd the property as Aaron's. Now, here's where it's almost beyond understanding. The location where the vest and the backpack was found was 15 cross-country air miles in deep snow from point to point from where Aaron's boots were found. Now, the items were found 2 miles from a ranch house. They searched the area intensively where they found this backpack, and they found nothing.
So there's no way he walked 15 miles with no boots on.
Well, let me get you to the part where they interviewed the lieutenant. So, remember what the SAR worker said. He said, well, Aaron couldn't travel far from the point they found the boots. That's the reason they just...
I'll tell you what, Dave, I have to interrupt you. I'm sorry. The music is telling us we need to take a break.
So the locations where all this were found were pretty identifiable. And I looked on a geological survey map, and it looks like it's just over 13 air miles point to point. One article said it was 15. I got it at 13. Now, if you talk about any kind of survival expert, to go through rugged mountains, it's never point to point. It's at least double, sometimes triple, because you're going up, down, sideways. And in this instance, in the middle of winter, chances are he's not going to be crossing creeks and rivers, so it makes it a longer trip. Well, they interviewed a corporal named Greg Todd, who's the head of the Sweetgrass County Search and Rescue, and they asked him, with what you have in front of you, what he thought might have happened. And the quote he gave was, "That is the million-dollar question," and that's all he'd say. Well, then they went to Lieutenant Alan Ronenberg of the Sweetgrass County Sheriff's Department, and in the Montana Pioneer Press of October 3rd, 2015, they asked him what he thought might have happened. And I quote him, he said, everything from he got turned around and got off the trail, got caught in the storm, passed away off the trail from hypothermia, to he's in Mexico somewhere, to UFOs got him. There's literally a full list, end of quote. Essentially, they have no idea.
Okay, folks, so we're back. Now, again, another strange case of a hunter who just all of a sudden got separated from his friends and didn't get back to camp, and then all these bizarre things happen. And again, I want to play another clip. This was actually a podcast from Art Bell. Here is another interesting case that David Paulides goes into. So we'll roll that clip next so that we keep this thing going and try to keep this under a half hour. Thanks.
10th of this year in Lemhi County, Idaho. Lemhi County is about 100 miles due west of Yellowstone National Park, right, and about 100 miles, maybe 125 miles north of Twin Falls. It's in a very, very rural area. A dad, a mom, a 2-year-old boy, grandma and grandpa, and another guy all go camping together into this remote area. They drive a dirt road, horrible road, for miles and miles to get into this lake area. Okay. And this lake sits in a giant bowl. Nobody's back there. It's really, really rural. Well, his name is Dior Kuntz Jr., 2 years old. His dad and his mom tell Grandma and Grandpa they're going to go take a walk. Grandma and Grandpa maybe didn't hear it or something, but there's 15, 20 minutes where nobody is watching this kid. And he disappears. And the mom and dad, Grandma and Grandpa, everyone searches for him, can't find him. Now they get a hold of Lemhi County Sheriffs. They search. They bring extra resources in. They search. Canine search. No scent trail. There's a really small creek. They go up and down that 10 times. They search the lake. Nothing. Make a very long story short, they ended up calling in the FBI, and they helped in the search. Now, one thing I talk about is that in some of these cases, the FBI shows up, and it's bizarre because there's no evidence of a crime. The FBI has protocol that on very small children with unusual disappearances, they will respond. FBI was there on this one. Now, I've told this story before, and I'll say it again. Back in the late 1950s, early 1960s, there was a boy named David Scott, 2 years old. And he and his family took a vacation in Mono County on the east side of the Sierras. And they went into an area almost identical to where Diero Kuntz and his family went to, except this was a little more people. There was a road going in. There was a couple of lakes. The family's inside their trailer. They see David. He's 2. He's very small. And they come back out a minute later. He's gone. And again, this valley is really steep hills all the way around. It's not that far from Sequoia and Yosemite. It's all granite. It's rough. There's no way anyone's getting out of this little valley. That's the thought of law enforcement.
Okay.
Well, they call in the mountain rescue teams for the Marines and the Army, where they do training over on that end. And these guys start looking everywhere. And they cleared the valley. They were searching cars leaving Mono County in the trunks, everything. Eventually, a sergeant and another guy start going up the side of one of these mountains on a series of switchbacks. And they go up the side of this mountain 3,000 feet. And they get to the top of the mountain. They go, hey, we're this far. We might as well keep walking. They go down a small valley. They go up the other side of another mountain. And behind a giant boulder, there is David Scott, laying almost naked, no shoes, no shirt, no pants, a diaper. That's it.
Wow.
And I can guarantee, Art, if anyone who's had kids, that kid did not get there on his own.
Of course not. Not that far. There's no way. And marks on his body?
Well, that's what they asked the Marine that found him, and he said, I'm not an expert on that, and I don't want to comment. And I did a huge archive search on this. The Sheriff's Department doesn't have the report anymore, and in the archives there was never anything on the cause of death or anything about David and the disappearance other than the facts I just gave you.
Wow.
Now, I do tell people that the trail up the side of that mountain from where he was camping, there was nothing on the side of that mountain. It was a granite wall with a trail of switchbacks. So if he was standing on that mountain, anybody could see him walking the switchbacks going up, and he could look right down and see his parents. So it doesn't make sense.
No, it sure doesn't. Boy, and it brings you right back to the impossible brings you to the paranormal, or at least it eventually gets you there. And I'm not trying to jump there, but you're not giving me much choice. If it was a predator, there would have been obvious signs of a predator. Even if the body wasn't eaten, there'd be marks everywhere. It would be little boy would have been a mess. These are recent. Here.
All right, folks. So hopefully, you got a little bit out of this. These cases fascinate me beyond words. I'm going to try to dig up some more cases that get more involved. This was kind of just an introduction. I wanted to see how this episode went, and if I get some interest, if I could get some subscribers and some likes, I want to keep doing stuff like this because there's a lot more David Paulides cases and what's called Missing 411. You can certainly check them out. And next week, I'm actually going to talk about Dogman. Yes, you heard me correctly. That's Dogman, folks, not Sasquatch. It's like a wolf and a dog and a Sasquatch mixed into one. It's a Bigfoot with a dog or wolf face. And there is plenty of people to back up this story. If it was one or two people, I'd say they were nuts. But when you have hundreds and hundreds of people talking about seeing Dogman, it's got to mean something. So I'm going to have some pretty cool podcast stuff, and we'll talk about that next. But in the meantime, please like and subscribe. And I'm going to keep digging up cool stuff and kind of just make a synopsis so you can decide for yourself if you want to pursue and watch this stuff, and generate some comments below. Make some comments, make them constructive. Talk about what you think might be going on. Is it UFOs? Is it cults? Is it underground worm people taking these people and snatching them up? I've had my own theories on how these people go missing. Problem is, every time I hear about new cases, it blows a hole in my theories. So anyway, what's cool about David, he doesn't make any assumptions. He just he just does his thing and keeps digging these cases up. So thanks so much, folks. Look forward to my next video. Thanks.